Hello everyone, welcome to Como Live. I'm Victoria. You might remember me from all of those water videos of me in the pool. Today's a little different. You'll notice I am not wearing my waders this time for once. And that is because we are in the fern room. So other than doing the water gardens, the indoor pools, I am also the horticulturist in charge of the ferns. So that's really exciting. And I'm talking to you today about some ferns that are a little unusual. So the topic today is ferns that do not look like ferns. So I have some gathered right here, and what I'm holding in my hand of these is probably the ferniest looking, right? Look at those nice feathery leaves compared to this and that lovely thing in the pool. It looks pretty fern-like, but actually, of the plants I'm talking about, what I'm holding is the one that is not a fern. This is not a fern. This is a moss, so forget that. So you might be thinking, well, what the heck, right? Like, I am going to pick that up later, I promise. But what makes a fern then? If that wasn't a fern, and this floating thing that looks kind of like duckweed is a fern, well, what are we talking about? So ferns are plants that reproduce by spores, as you know, and mosses do that as well. But ferns also have a vascular system. Vascular means they have something called xylem and phloem. What that basically means is that they can use these systems within themselves to transport water and nutrients. And other than the vascular system and spores, they also have something called megaphylls. That's a fancy word, very scientific sounding. What that means is that they have complex leaves. And that is something that moss I showed you does not have, even though it does look like a fern. So let's start with this beauty in the water here. Obviously, I am partial to aquatic plants. So that lovely thing is called Marsilia quadrifolia, or European water clover. So it is native to Europe, like the name suggests. It is a fern. That's a fern. It is aquatic. It grows from creeping rhizomes that grow in the muddy bottoms of, shallow ponds, lakes. And it has actually naturalized itself in the United States, even though it is native to Europe. So when we say naturalized, that means that it's sort of invasive, but it's not really doing a lot of damage to native populations. So it just, like a dandelion, has naturalized. We don't consider that an invasive weed. So this plant has actually been in the United States for over 100 years now, especially in the northeastern U.S. It cannot survive our winters. I'm sorry, you cannot plant this at your house. It's just can't handle that cold. It can really only survive to zone 6. We are zone 4. Yep. And the lower that number goes, the colder it gets, for those of you wondering. So we're going to talk about something else that's pretty flashy, kind of exciting. So this, let me just rearrange this for you for a second. This is a horsetail. Some of you may feel that this is a very familiar looking fern. We do have horsetails in Minnesota that are native. They're not this big. This is a Mexican giant horsetail. It is native to Mexico and other parts of Central America. It is the biggest horsetail fern, which is really fun to have. You'll notice it in our fern room, kind of lining the back walls of the back corner of the room. It is so cool. Not something that you would automatically think, why yes, that's a fern. Instead you look at it and you think, well, what is this weird prehistoric plant? And it is kind of prehistoric. So this is something that is referred to as a living fossil. When we call plants a living fossil, what we mean is that they look very similar to how they were hundreds of millions of years ago. That's right. Over 100 million years ago, we have fossil records of horsetails all the way back to the Paleozoic era, which is actually over 250 million years ago, for being precise. And now horsetails back then could grow to almost 100 feet. So this doesn't look so big now, does it? This is the biggest that we have now, but yeah, they used to be a lot bigger. And they do believe that they used to be a staple for herbivore dinosaurs. So that's kind of fun. They can be invasive. They do also grow with rhizomes. I mentioned that with our water clover as well. You'll hear me say that a lot. A lot of ferns, most ferns, do grow with rhizomes. And a rhizome is a stem that grows kind of horizontally. It sends out roots and shoots. And rhizomes, usually you can cut them into a lot of pieces, and each piece will grow a new plant, which is why a lot of invasive plants are rhizomatous. They have rhizomes. So horsetails are invasive in some parts of the world. This horsetail is not invasive here. I'm not convinced that it would survive our winters either. But be careful if you are planting horsetails. Make sure you know what kinds you're planting. Make sure you're only planting our lovely natives, which are common or field horsetail, Equisetum arvens, Equisetum fluviatile, that's a fun word to say, which is water horsetail. Those are some of our natives. So we're going to move on to a plant that is very invasive, actually. Move that over. Now we're going to get a close look at, I'm going to just say this is probably the weirdest fern we have. So this is Alvinia minima. And yeah, that's a fern, folks. In my youth, visiting the conservatory, I absolutely 100% thought that this was duckweed. Like, totally, no question, didn't even think about it. But no, this is truly a true fern. You can see all these cute little pieces. Take a look at those leaves, very cute. The water, by the way, is not purple for a specific reason. It's just we dye our water. So this plant is native to Central and South America. It is invasive internationally. So this is another plant to be very careful of. I do not recommend buying it. Duckweed is actually a much kinder plant than this one. Duckweed has a lot of protein. Duckweed can remove nitrates from water. If you remove duckweed as a crop, it can be food for waterfowl. So duckweed is annoying for sure, but it is not as vicious as this little guy. This little guy does not really provide food for local animals. It mostly just shades out and outcompetes other plants and causes a big old problem. So we have it in its own little pool. It is separate from everything else. It is safe in here. It is not going to spread from us to Minnesota. But be careful when you look up Salvinia, because it is super cool. I mean, this is a fern. That's wild. But yeah, it spreads like crazy. Our last fern is one of my favorites. Let's take a walk over to where it's hanging. Again, this is not what you think of when you think of a fern. Look at this. Oh Lord, look at those cute little leaves. I love it so much. It's a little growing tip right there. This is called button fern because it's cute as a button. No, not really. It's because its leaves are clearly button shaped. Again, rhizomes. These that you're looking at, these strands, these are rhizomes. They're stems that can send out roots, send out other stems. They grow, obviously this is hanging, but they can grow vertically. And this is a fun plant because it can grow terrestrially in the soil, or it can grow epiphytically like this one is. or you can just hang it from another plant and it'll just do its thing. Really, really fun plant. So this is native to Southeast Asia. It's found in Malaysia, Indonesia, other countries in that area. And I love it. It is called Pyrosia nummularifolia. That does not exactly roll off the tongue, but Pyrosia is a genus of ferns that is one of my favorites. We have several other different kinds of Pyrosias. They all look very different, but they're all super cool and none of them look like a normal fern. Highly recommend Googling. And yes, if you want to have this as a houseplant, it can grow in a normal pot. It's really fun. I do water it every day, but I mean, you probably don't have to. We like to really give our ferns above and beyond treatment here. So definitely keep an eye out for this one when you're in the fern room. Take a look around the room as you come through. One of the best parts about this room is how lush and tropical it feels. But definitely try and pay attention to some of the more unusual plants in here, because just about everything in here is a fern, no matter how weird they look. And that's something we're pretty excited about. Who knew that ferns came in so many different shapes and sizes, right? So that about wraps it up for me. I'm glad I could share some of the more unusual ferns in the fern room. Please come and visit them the next time you're in. And please enjoy your day. Thank you for tuning in to Como Live.